On this episode of the New Money Habits podcast, Maria and I discuss the importance of decluttering both physical spaces and your finances.
Good morning, Maria.
Good morning.
I would like to thank you for braving the elements of our illnesses. I just want to let our listeners know up front that we're both getting over some stuff, so we might sound a little off. Yeah, our apologies up front. I thought I was doing fine, and then all of a sudden, the congestion, the more I'm speaking, I can feel the congestion come back on. It's fun.
We're going to use our mute buttons as best as we can today.
Yes, and apparently I'm not allowed to say anything funny.
Yeah, it sends me into a coughing fit, so we'll try. We'll try to.
So I will just speak as monotone as possible.
Please don't do that for the sake of our listeners. Please.
No. In fact, that was just another attempt to get you to laugh.
Thanks. Such a good rule follower he is.
I know. Okay, so the topic of the day, and actually the topic of the month, if you are a member of our ever-growing Facebook group, is declutter and sell. So the idea of the month is, hey, let's find some opportunities to get organized, declutter some of the areas of our homes, and then sell and maybe help out financially. But I think I want to really focus on the declutter part, or just this concept of how we are affected by things like disorganization and clutter. Because as you and I were just talking about it, my desk right now is pretty cluttery. And as I try to get work done, it makes it a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
But I think it's relatable to our finances as well.
Oh, 100%. And I also had a very, very messy desk. And I was just telling Nino that I insisted on Saturday, like, this has to be my number one priority today. We'll deal with the kitchen later. We'll deal with the living room later. Like, I need to really focus on the desk. And the reason is because I walk into my office and all of a sudden go into like stress mode. It's like, if it's on my desk that way, it's in my head that way. And I don't know about you, but my finances, it's the same thing. Like, if it's not organized, if there's not some sense of where things are going to go, I'm just always like, I don't know. And then I'm in my head, and it becomes very, very overwhelming. So I think it's actually a really good and relevant topic for today.
Yeah, I'm noticing the same feeling with my own kind of finances at this point. You know, as I've shared recently, I'm just going through a different season where things are a little bit tighter, a little bit different than they normally are. And I'm watching it kind of affect my drive and my motivation to stay on top of things and be as organized as I usually am. And so the chaos is trying to creep in, where it's all like, I maybe didn't plan as early as I normally would, or I don't execute on the day that I had already planned. And it's like, I got to fend off against that as much as possible, because if nothing else, I need an organized mess, or it needs to be organized chaos.
Yeah.
Which sounds like an oxymoron, but this is exactly how I used to manage the store when I worked at Blockbuster. You remember Blockbuster Video?
I do. I'm old enough to remember.
Yeah. I wonder how many of our listeners
I was just going
remember.
to say, probably not a super large percentage, but...
Actually, I wonder if more of our listeners are in our demographic age-wise than maybe in the younger. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I remember each day of the week there was a different big task that needed to be done. So new releases came out on Tuesday, which means Monday you did the wall. And what that meant was that new release wall had to be reorganized and reshifted to make room for the new things coming. And as you're taking things off and making space for things to come on, we already have boxes and boxes of new releases in the store ready to go. So those are in a spot, and everything that's coming off the walls in a spot, and the moving, and it's like everything had to either be an organized mess or it was just going to be a mess.
Right.
And so I feel the same way with the finances. Like, okay, things can kind of be a little bit chaotic, but they better be organized at least.
I do think too that there's oftentimes a compound effect that happens. So, when you just put one thing on the desk, oh, I'll get to that later, it doesn't feel like it's going to be a big deal. And then you do that again and then again and again. And that's where that habit turns into a real problem for us. And so I think we could see that in the way that we are with our money too, whether we have this great plan. A lot of people will sit down with us as coaches, create this amazing plan, and stick to it for any given amount of time. And then there's that one time where they're like, well, we're going to do this instead. And we're not going to use the envelope this time if that's what part of their plan was, or we're going to put it on this card instead of over here. You know where I'm going with this? And then
Yeah.
it seems like no big deal for that one time, or even the second, or maybe even the 10th time. But you do that often enough, it becomes like, oh, you turn around one day, you're like, what just happened? Like, I don't know where all this mess came from. So that's how it was for my desk, I'll tell you. And what's crazy is this was not just my doing. So my family says, oh, mom does that, or my wife takes care of that. And so they'll find it somewhere else in the house and then just go put it on the desk. And so then it becomes everyone's mess in my mind on my desk. And I think that can happen too when we're looking at our finances. You go out to lunch with somebody, oh, let me get that, that this one's on me. And we just do that one time. And then it's something that can continue to build over and over. So there's definitely something to be said about the compounding effect in a negative direction with this.
Yeah. That's why I always appreciate your perspective, is the idea of how does that one-time behavior actually multiply into an actual habit, and then how does that habit end up leaving us in a place where it's like, I never meant to be here. This is not what I had planned at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm trying to reflect right now on, so what have I been doing differently that has things feeling a little bit more disorganized? And I think one of the things is, because the money situation is a little bit different, I went from paying myself every 2 weeks to, let's just do this thing once a month. Let's do it at the beginning of the month so that it's all done and over with. And as of the recording of this, it's the third day of the month.
Mm-hmm.
And while just this morning, right? Because the first fell on a Saturday, whatever. But like, yeah, it's like all of a sudden you lose track of, like, no, you said you're going to do it on this day. And like, so it has to happen on this day. Otherwise, you look up and it's the third, and things that were due on the first and the second. It's like, oops. And when I was paying myself every 2 weeks, this stuff would have been handled like a week or more ago, and it would have just been done.
Yeah.
So happens to the best of us.
That's right. That's right. It happens to every single one of us, and you just have to know when to recognize it and then say, okay, today I'm going to do it differently. And you did.
Hey there, budgeteers. The new year is here, and you know what that means. It's time for fresh starts and new habits. If one of your goals is to get better with your money, New Money Habits has exactly what you need to kick things off right: the Payday Power Planner. This isn't just any budget tool. The Payday Power Planner is designed to work with your pay periods, not just the calendar month. Why does that matter? Because it helps you to see exactly when your money is coming in and going out. No surprises, no guesswork. With the Payday Power Planner, you'll know if you're working with a surplus or facing a deficit, so you can make informed decisions about your money. It's not just a plan, it's the clarity and control you've been looking for to start the new year strong. Make this the year you finally build new habits for financial freedom. Grab your free Payday Power Planner from New Money Habits today and take the first step toward a better financial future. Visit newmoneyhabits.com now, because this year, It's time for a better plan for your money.
And so, how can we help our listeners identify what areas they're feeling the clutter and give them some practical ways out to declutter, if you will?
Just in our financial areas, or you think any area?
Let's start broadly and work our way into financially.
All right. Well, I think one of the things we can do is really start to be in tune with how we are feeling about something when we walk into a place. So if we're talking super broadly, when you walk into your home from being somewhere else, what's the overall feeling? Is it one of peace and tranquility, or do you feel overwhelmed when you're in that area? And I can tell you that for me personally, there are different rooms that create different feelings. I feel like I'm one of the walking inside out kids from that movie when I go through my house. So in one area, if it's all something that I'm very aware of and I try to be on top of a little bit more, it stays a lot less cluttered, and I feel a sense of peace. And then I go and walk, let's say, to my daughter's room for a quick example, which I'm not in charge of, and I have like instant anxiety. I'll walk by, I'm like, oh, what just happened in there? And it just looks like a tornado went through. And so there's other different rooms that it maybe are theirs. And so I was like, eventually it just gets to the point where it drives me so crazy that I do go in, kind of take a little bit more control of that and try to fix that. So I do think it's important to recognize how you're feeling. I don't know if that's just a female thing. Do you ever have a physiological reaction when you see clutter?
Yeah, it's called avoidance. Oh, I mean, I guess the physiological, like, I turn and I walk away, like, hightail it out of there.
Okay, well, that's not what I meant by physiological, but that is that is how you deal with it. Why? What makes you turn? Like, what in your body happens that makes you want to turn? Like, do you feel a heart rate increase? Do you sense? I don't know. I mean, that might be something that you're not in tune with.
The palms get sweaty.
Okay,
and
almost like a first date.
And
you go into flight or fight mode, and you flee.
The heart rate probably does start to accelerate. And it probably depends on what room it is or what's happening. For instance, like if I walk into the kitchen and it's a mess from a previous meal, depending on many factors. One, did I prepare the meal and so I'm looking for help cleaning up? Or did my wife prepare the meal and it's my turn to clean up? That's one factor. Another factor might be, how long has it been there? Are we talking like it's from earlier today? Or are we talking like it's from earlier this week? And so these different things all kind of impact that, depending on the size of the mess, and then specifically what's included in the mess. If it's like simple bowls, plates, and silverware, okay. But when it's like the pots and the pans and that bowl that we hardly ever use, but we used it this time for something, and it doesn't fit into the dishwasher, so you have to wash it by hand. Like, all of those things start to play into those responses and possible avoidance.
Okay. Well, so I would say wherever you start to feel that higher level of physiological response, that's where you would want to at least, I guess it depends. I was going to say it's where you want to start. I'm no expert in this decluttering thing, by the way. But we should probably bring Wendy on here. I do think that you could go both ways. You could go either way. Either you start there because that's what's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck, or you start at the smaller spot because that seems a little bit more doable. So I guess it depends on your personality. I can tell you that one thing I want to add to what you were saying is that I can feel my temper changing when I'm especially on some of those larger ones, where it's like, this is a huge mess, or you've got the pots and pans, to your example, I can feel my temper rising, and my ability, or my chances of like blowing up on the kids are much higher in those moments than when it's just a couple things here and there. So I do think that I have personally a physiological response to all of that, and it probably is more of a sense of anxiety, whether it's one that I've recognized as anxiety or not. It's just like, because I think maybe it becomes personally, I put it on myself, like, this has to be my job to take care of now, even though it doesn't. Like, I should be able to just delegate some of that and say, hey, you go clean up this and you clean up that. And I do try to do that. Excuse me. Try to do that, but sometimes they're not going to do it the way we want, right? So there's a control issue there.
Yeah.
And sometimes they actually just don't do a good job. so it's like, then it's like, okay, so I'm going to have them waste their time doing that, and then I have to do it. So I go through this on a regular basis, in case you can't figure that out. Well, when it comes to other areas of our lives, maybe things that we are in control of, finances, for example, if that's something that we are in control of, sometimes it becomes even more frustrating, because I'm like, well, I can't blame the kids for that mess. Like, that one's on me,
Yeah.
And so if we want to start with something that seems more manageable in an area like that, I'm trying to think of a good example of where the finances can feel so cluttered. But we did start broadly, and I'm already right there at the finances.
Yeah.
So I apologize for that.
No, do not apologize. I think, given the time of year that we're recording this too, it's tax season.
Yeah.
And so that's a really interesting place where people can either feel maybe a great sense of like excitement, maybe their tax situation is pretty straightforward. It's something that they can do that on their own, file real quickly, and often expect a tax refund, like maybe. But I know for me, and having multiple streams of income, and having a K1 and a 1099 and a this and a that, it's just another place in my finances where things feel cluttered and a mess and not as organized as I would like. Even if all the paperwork is organized, it's like, okay, well, now there's a process to get these things done.
Excuse me. Okay, so I think with something like that, one of the things that's helped me is beginning with the end in mind. So I actually have multiple streams of income as well, and the 1099s and the K1s, and this is a time of year where I'm actually feeling pretty organized. And I will say that there is some unknown or anxiety around the season, mostly because of the unknown. And it's not anxiety is too strong a word for that one, but there is a sense of not knowing what's going to happen, and there's this lull, because even if we have all of our information, we have to wait for the information from these other sources, right? And I don't feel worried at this time, because I actually have set money aside in case we do need to pay in. So there's not a sense of, oh no, what are we going to do? But there is that sense of, I'd like to be able to use that money for something else if I could, please. And so not knowing what that's going to be used for is a little bit frustrating. So I will say that. But back to starting with the end in mind, there's no way something like that is going to be organized overnight. And so one of the things that I like to do is say, okay, if things were organized the way that I wanted them to be, what would that look like? And then I start backtracking from there. So, for example, one of the biggest things for us is the whole home office deduction. That's one of the biggest pieces that needs to be organized. It's not like it's part of the biggest part of our taxes, but the reason I need all this information is because it will take into account what all of our electric bills are, what all of our water bills are, what all of those things are. And I want to be able to just say at the end of any given year, here's how much we spent on electric, water, et cetera, et cetera. So I have a one sheet Word document that has all of the things listed that I'm going to want. And I just resave that year after year after year so I can have it organized, right? And then I have a file folder for each of those things that are paper bills. And then I have a way to just look up real quickly what they are for those that are not. And so it doesn't take but a little bit of time to just go, here's what we paid January, February, March, April, May, etc. And then I can just put it on that one piece of paper. Now, is that going to work for everybody? No, of course not. But I had to know what is the information that I want and then just start. So I know that I'm not going to fix everything from past years, but I know how I can start moving forward for the future years and recognizing that it's not even going to feel like I did something great until tax season of next year, when I can pull it all out and go, oh, now that only took 45 minutes because I had this, in place. Whereas before it would take 4.5 to 7 hours just to go find all the paper because it wasn't done in an organized fashion. So,
Yeah, I like that. Starting with the end in mind and figuring out, what it is that you're going to want. And then I think for me, that as you were sharing that, I'm thinking about like sprints, where you're not going to do the whole thing all at once.
right.
But if you can sprint your way there by identifying either a milestone that you're trying to achieve, and so for you, you were looking for both like electric bills and water bills. So like, I don't know why this is a poor example, but it's like, hey, maybe at least get the electric bills. Like, go find them, do that one. Okay, great. That was a sprint. You're done. You kind of get to check it off the to-do list. Then the next sprint might be the water bills, right? Just as again, another poor example. But another way that I think about doing sprints, and this can go back to whether you're trying to clean up your finances or just clean up your kitchen, set a timer. Set a 15-minute timer, a 30-minute timer, whatever that is. I've been doing this for work for a while. Actually, let me correct myself. I was doing this for work for a while. It's a habit I got out of, and now I'm reminding myself, like, get back to this habit. But I'd set a 50-minute timer, and I'd get as much done in 50 minutes as I could. Then I'd take a 10-minute or a 15-minute break, and then I would do it again. And I found myself being able to manage the sense of overwhelm more calmly when I had a timer going. And so I encourage our listeners, when you're thinking about, I need to get my finances in order, and maybe that means I need to figure out what I've been spending, set a timer and go back for 30 minutes and get as much information as you can, and then give yourself a little bit of a break. And what I've also found when I'm sprinting like that is when that timer goes off at 50 minutes, if I'm in a groove, then I just keep with it and I'll take a break. Like, I might reset the timer for a shorter period of time, but I just keep going so I don't lose that momentum. But if I'm kind of struggling and that timer goes off, it's like, okay, take a break.
Yeah, you had given yourself permission ahead of time to do that.
Hey there, budgeteers. It's a brand new year, and that means it's time for new habits, starting with your money. Take charge of your finances in 2025 with New Money Habits Financial Coaching. This isn't your typical financial advice. New Money Habits is all about giving you the knowledge, tools, and support to make confident money moves and build a rock-solid financial foundation. Here's the deal. We're offering a free discovery session to kick off your journey to financial freedom. That's right, no strings attached. In this session, one of our expert coaches will help you to identify your financial goals and create a better plan for your money. We'll help you master your money mindset, sharpen your money management skills, and keep you accountable every step of the way. Make 2025 the year you say goodbye to financial stress and hello to the freedom you've been dreaming about. Schedule your free discovery session today and start creating the new money habits you need to achieve financial freedom.
And I actually used that trick as well, but I use much shorter time. So I'm actually glad that you said when it's done, if you're still in the groove, then just keep on going. Because that's actually one of the ways that we can kind of trick ourselves. I think oftentimes one of the toughest things to do is just start. And the reason that we have such a tough time starting is because we want to commit to being done with it. So what, right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yep.
and so if we look at this kitchen, or we look at a specific closet, or we look at the pantry, whatever it is that we're in the process of wanting to declutter, looking at our checkbook, looking at our tax, bills, whatever it is, we say, okay, I don't have time to finish that. That's kind of the script that we play in our minds. I don't have time to finish that. And so when we say that over and over and over, we just say, well, since I don't have time to finish it, I'm not going to start it. And so one of the things that I've helped clients do is just allow themselves to start without committing to finishing it in that moment. So just give yourself 10 to 15 minutes. That's the shorter time that I'll say. So just dedicate 10 to 15 minutes to doing, whether it's putting a specific, dishes away, unloading the dishwasher, starting whatever the piece is.
Yep.
And then oftentimes, because they've started, they're in that mode and they continue to go, sometimes not to its completion, but they will then come back and set another 10-minute timer later on down and even that later in that day, and they'll be able to finish it because now they can look at it and go, that's something I can finish. But a lot of times it's just that script that we play over and over and over. And I think that's one of the biggest lies that we have, that we tell ourselves. It's not really a lie. It's true. We don't have time to finish it, but that indicates then that we just don't even start.
Yeah. I really like the idea of, short, purposeful blocks of time, and also want to encourage people to think about if there's low-hanging fruit, something that is super simple inside that process. So I go back to cleaning up the kitchen. Our kitchen and living room are, open concepts, so they bleed into one another. And when I see the dishes, sometimes what I actually do is I go over to the living room and I'll pick up the dog toys and I'll fluff the pillows on the couch and I'll re-throw the blankets. And it's like, ooh, look, now the living room looks awesome. And I move my way into the kitchen and the more difficult parts of that chore, if you will. And so the same thing with, when you're kind of decluttering your finances, like find the low-hanging fruit to get you started, which will give you some momentum and some quick wins and be like, okay, now I can move into the more difficult things.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think one of the interesting things, like with the low hanging fruit, for example, this is just a personal example. I needed to know how to budget for gas. And we actually, admittedly, we use a credit card for gas that we then pay off every single month. But I wanted to know how to best plan so that I had the exact amount from that category to pay for that category. And so I finally one month just told my husband, hey, every time you get gas, because he drives an hour to work and an hour from work. So we get a lot of gas. And I just said, every time you get gas, please save the receipts. And we never used to do that, but for like 2 to 3 months, that's what we did. And I just had this stack of receipts. And each month I was going to go through and I added them all up to see how do we average for gas. And it's been really interesting to see the ups and downs with the way that the prices have been. But that has just given me a little bit more peace of mind to say, I know I'm going to have enough set aside specifically for that so that it doesn't throw us for a loop. And that was just one of those things where, because we did a different way, we used a card for that. It wasn't as to the penny, as it used to be when we were just using cash and stuff. And so I knew, okay, we kind of got off track, if you will. And there's good things that came from that. And there are some frustrating things that came from that. Find the frustrating thing and fix it. And that's what we were able to do just by that one stupid little thing. Now he doesn't have to keep the receipts anymore because I can go back and do it. But I wanted to know how to plan ahead in a sufficient manner. And so that was, I know it didn't sound like low hanging fruit, but it kind of was, because it just got a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more organized, you know?
Yep. Yeah. It actually made me think about how I used to manage gasoline for our own household and the way that I implement with a lot of clients. It's one of those it's one of those areas where it makes the managing of money just a little bit more complex.
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels like a little bit more clutter, but sometimes I wonder if it just brings clarity. And that is, oftentimes, even if somebody's using a credit card at the pump, which I would 100% support because of just the security portion of alone that I've talked about with credit cards in the past, right? So
Right.
convenience, security, cool. But the way we have managed it is there's a separate checking account and I put money into that checking account. But I always put just not even just a little bit more. If I know that I'm going to budget about $300 a month in gasoline, I'll actually round it up to 350 and hopefully in hopes that we don't even use the 300, and if we go over we're okay. But what happens is month after month after month, after 3 months, there's like a balance in that checking account because there's a surplus, and that surplus becomes, let's go get the oil change done. And the
Mm-hmm.
other very minimal, preventative maintenance things. It's not enough to replace like a blown tire or replace tires when needed. So I have to plan for that. But it's always enough to go get the preventative maintenance services that we need done. And so it was just a cool way to always kind of have that set aside. And then every once in a while you look up and you're like, there's way more money in there than I anticipated. And so now I might reallocate it toward, let's start saving for repairing of tires or something else. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a little cluttery, but when executed well.
Hey there, budgeteers. You know, good news can only be good news if there's bad news. So, what's the bad news? The bad news is you and I have a deadly disease called sin, and this disease causes us to rebel and disobey God. See, God is holy, righteous, and just, and He cannot be in the presence of sin. So, this horrible disease of ours separates us from the God who created us. And the bad news gets worse. There isn't anything you or I can do to make ourselves right with God. We are dead in our sins and on our way to an eternity separated from God. But that's not God's will for us. See, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish but have everlasting life. God did what only God could do. He made a way for us to be reconciled to Him through Jesus Christ. Jesus came into the world to save sinners like you and me. While we were still sinners, storing up God's anger against us for our rebellion and disobedience, Christ died for us. Jesus took the punishment that you and I deserve and have earned. Jesus is the substitute for your punishment and mine. Now, isn't that some good news? The word gospel means good news. The gospel of Jesus Christ is that you and I broke God's law and Jesus paid the fine. When we place our faith and trust in Jesus, we get to experience God's grace and mercy. Our gratitude should turn us from our rebellious and disobedient sin toward God, seeking after Him and His righteousness. When we do, God gives us a new heart and a new mind. Praise God for His goodness, and remember, God loves, humans sin, Jesus saves.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are very quote unquote decluttered ways to get the results that you were just talking about. I mean, there are so many online accounts that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you said checking account. Did you say
Yep.
checking account? I think
Yes.
so. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so you just use that checking account to then pay your card, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
So you could do the same thing with a savings account, technically. And there are
Mm-hmm.
so many of those online savings accounts. Like I have some at Capital One, and I have some at Discover. And what I like about both of those is you can have as many as you want, and you can name them whatever you want. and it all is in one place. So yeah, it doesn't feel super cluttered. It actually just looks like a bunch of file folders. Like, oh, I just got to transfer the money from the gas one to the checking account, and or to that card, because you can just draft directly from savings account. So I don't actually think it is more clutter. I think if you
Yeah.
can find an organized way to do it, it actually becomes easier for people, even than just grabbing cash sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, it's kind of like a digital envelope. And sometimes one of the ways to declutter is to take things that are commingled and just a mess and assign them a little bit more purpose and say, okay, I'm going to drill down just to be more organized.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm going to share this. It feels like we're kind of going off the rails, but it's not entirely. So I teach young kids. I teach young kids about personal finance, and I'm teaching a class right now about it's kind of like a game. It's a game. And with this game, one of the things that we are doing is having them like actually get paychecks. So sometimes they'll get paid in cash, and sometimes they'll get paid with a check, and sometimes they'll get paid with direct deposit. And it's just to help introduce these kids to all of the different forms of payment that we get, and how to decide what to do with their money, etc. And we have a budget binder that we're setting up in case they decide they want to be able to use kind of like an envelope system, so we're just exposing them to all these different things. And one of the things that I told them last week was, I want you to be organized. That's it. Like, I just want to help you get into the habit of finding an organizational system that works for you, so that when you're actually getting money coming in, some of them, they're like 13, 14. So some of them have their own little entrepreneurial things that they're doing, but most of them don't have jobs yet. And so they don't have an actual income, but they're going to be darn set when they do, because they're going to have the organizational put in place. And so I just want to share that, because sometimes we already have a mess, whether it's in our heads, on our desks, or in our checking accounts. How nice is it to help prevent some of that mess? So if you're listening today and maybe you're like, these people are crazy, how do they get into the messes that they're talking about right now? Just count your blessings and then make a plan to not get into that mess.
Yep.
Excuse me. So,
yeah, think about the young lady that I work with, who I've been working with since the moment she had an earned income, and being able to establish all of those healthy practices early.
yeah.
She feels, amongst her peer group, she feels like she has the most control over her finances than anybody else in her peer group.
Yeah.
And she should.
And that's a really good way to say it, because that is something that we can have control over. So in this class, we actually have this, I kind of use a bingo setup to make it happen, but I have like that actual bingo ball roller, that
Oh, okay,
roll and
yeah.
the balls come out. So there's like 76, I think, of those, 72, 70 something. And I have a board with 70, the exact same number of life events that could happen to us that would throw things off for us, things that we can't necessarily control. Right. And we roll the balls and have this randomly thing that's happened to us. And that's how we're making life happen for these kids. But what you just said is so important, because this is something that they have control over. And you and I, we talk oftentimes about controlling the things that we can, so that we can be prepared for the things that we can't control for. And I think that that's just one of those super important things, because there are so many things that are going to happen that we cannot control. Gas prices, for example, in our last example, we can't control what that price is going to be, but we can control where we drive. Maybe we can't control going to and from work, but we can control some of the extra trips that we want to do. We can control how much we set aside ahead of time, that kind of thing. So the more that we take back control of things that we actually can, the less out of control some of those circumstances feel to us.
Fantastic. What another great conversation about just thinking about things a little bit differently. So just to kind of summarize, when you're looking to declutter, first, check in on those feelings. You always help me to remember that because I'm not doing that. And it's funny because it's like, it's right there. Like I know what feelings I'm feeling. I'm just not pausing long enough to say, like, what are you feeling?
Yeah. You're
And
not listening
then,
well enough.
yeah. And then sprint your way to the end of a task just by getting started. Set a timer. Allow yourself to get started even if you're not going to finish.
Yep.
And when that timer goes off, either take that break, or if you're in the groove, keep going, but maybe reset the timer so that you're giving yourself permission to stop again shortly. And and go after the low-hanging fruit. Get started on the easy stuff, work your way up to the hard stuff. I think those are some very good practical tips for our listeners today.
Absolutely. Good summary.
Yeah. Well, thank you for spending the time. As always, Maria, I appreciate you. And we'll do it again soon.
Hopefully we're feeling better those days.
Yeah, seriously.
That does it for this episode of the New Money Habits Podcast. Remember, if you have any questions, make sure to hit us up on social at New Money Habits and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please consider leaving a 5-star rating and review to help us spread this message of hope to people looking for a better plan for their money.